And we are live. Hi, I'm Joe Carter. This is Things That Matter, and we're here to take on topics that are aimed at understanding ourselves, each other, and our world a little better so we can navigate more effectively in our own lives and the community we live in. So, we're here tonight. We got a topic going, and James, do you want to cover what we're going to be talking about tonight?
Sure. It's one of the things we hear a lot about on up here on Google Plus and other places. Sure, we've all heard it before. Is that we can't choose or change our beliefs. We're here tonight to explore that a little bit, question that a little bit, and try and flesh that out and how that really applies to everyday life. Can we really change what we believe, or are we not able to do that? So I'll pass it back to you there, Joe.
It does help when I am not muted, I think. That's one of those OSHA things we got to follow. All right, so we are here today talking with Tonya Galaxy, and she's going to share her transformation story. Tonya, thank you very much for being here with us. And how about if you share a little bit about yourself and what you originally believed? What was the landscape of your belief structure?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, well, a little bit about me first for the people who don't know. I'm 34, mother of 3, housewife, happily married. We just celebrated our 9-year anniversary yesterday, actually, so that's pretty cool. And I was a Christian pretty much my entire life up until about a year and a half ago. And what I believed was very much in line with fundamentalist beliefs. However, towards the end of my Christian, beliefs, I was turning more into like a moderate Christian. But I didn't stick with that long because it just didn't go with what I had been taught in the Bible too much. So I had a real problem. It was a constant struggle. It was a constant battle within my own mind and within the Bible itself, with other Christians, everything. But I believed, your typical Jesus saves. And I was of the camp that did not rely on works whatsoever for salvation. It was strictly believing, that Jesus Christ paid for all of my sins, past, present, and future. There's nothing I could do, even deconvert, that would separate me from this salvation. Because there's a passage in the Bible that talks about once you have the Holy Spirit, you're sealed like forever. So
they call that salvation by salvation by grace, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. And then when I got into the grace part of it, it helped me a lot, because before that, it was when I did believe in the works-based, it was like it almost made me go crazy. Like I started having panic attacks, and because I was constantly thinking about if I was going to go to hell or not. It was just insane. I struggled with like blasphemous thoughts that I would have, and I would freak out, like literally freak out, like almost have panic attacks, like, oh my God, I've done it now. I'm really going to go to hell now. I've committed the unforgivable sin, so I dealt with that. And then I finally went over to this grace thing, and that was a huge relief for a while. But like I said, there's still those scriptures that talked about you got to do this and you got to do this. You can't be all liars go to hell. So I'm like, oh my God, what do I do now? So seriously, it's like you're a paranoid schizophrenic. It's really what it felt like. And I realized that the last few years of my Christian life was just me trying to make sense of the Bible for myself personally. And I just couldn't do it. It wore me out to the point of complete exhaustion, and that's when I started looking into other things, and I'm so glad I did. So I guess that sums it up a little bit.
Thanks. So, from your perspective, how do you think that those beliefs got originally seeded into you? In other words, how did that web of ideologies, that lens that you saw through, get formed? Was it something that you pursued and chose? Was it by virtue of the culture you were within, your family environment, or whatever? How do you view that as happening?
The Christian lens, is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yes.
I was pretty much raised with it from as far back as I can remember. So all my life that I can absolutely remember. However, we weren't really strict. My parents did take us to Baptist church in Virginia, but it wasn't considered Southern Baptist. We weren't the kind that like never cut our hair and wore long skirts. You know, it was really relaxed and cool. But there was a couple of times where I went to my grandfather's church, and they were like extreme Southern Baptists. So they were the long-haired, long skirt, you know, people. And I remember it so well. I was probably only like 5 years old, and I'll never forget this. I was at their church, and I was in the children's Sunday school service, and there was a man up there talking about how when we die, that we're gonna all be in heaven, everybody, and my life, my entire life, is gonna be played on a screen for everyone to see. And now that I'm 34 and I can look back, it's amazing to me that even at the age of 5, where I hadn't really done much of anything wrong yet, you know what I mean? It petrified me. It really did. And so I'll never forget that. And I think that always kind of stuck in my head throughout my entire Christian life. I really do. Like in the back of my head. Like I was always scared like something like that would happen.
So you would call that, well, some people might call that child abuse, but you would call that a defining moment. That really played a powerful role in how you framed the whole relationship with God and reality from that point forward.
Yeah, definitely did. Definitely did. That set the stage for the type of God I was dealing with, pretty much.
So did it also shape the way you saw other people? And if so, how did that make you see what it was in your own world and the world around you? I know you shared a little bit about the fact that you were sort of locked in, correct me if I'm wrong about this characterization, but like a prison of self-inflicted feeling of failure that you're meeting up to it. But how did it also help you to be able to determine and build relationships with people in the world too? How did it shape what you saw?
It didn't. I didn't turn into one of those like bigoted, judgmental type of person where I was always constantly like comparing myself to other people and thinking I was better because I was saved. I never really did that. I ended up actually like seeing people and mainstream religion, organized religion, as a really bad thing, and I actually felt really sorry for, and this is when I was Christian, I felt really sorry for all of the people who believed in this works-based salvation, because I understood what that felt like, to battle within yourself, you know, am I good enough? Am I going to make it? Constantly worried about that. So I felt a lot of like genuine heartache for people, because these are supposed to be like my brothers and sisters, you know. And to touch on the brothers and sisters thing, I took that very seriously. Like if you claimed you were a Christian and it lined up, you know, pretty much with, you know, scripture, really for me, all you had to do was say that you believed in Jesus and you knew why he came. That was good enough for me. I really felt like I connected with that person, like on a spiritual level. Like they understood me and I understood them, and they shared the same kind of like love for God that I did. So there was that. And then I don't know, like I would see people, let's say I'm driving down the road and I'd see people just walking on the side of the road. I'd pray for them because I'd be like, oh man, I hope that they get the faith in Jesus. Like that's all I thought about was like people's salvation. when I wasn't worried about my own, I was concerned with other people's, pretty much.
Yeah, so you had quite the bout with having this thing affect you personally far more than it affected other people. I think in other words, the way you described it to me, it sounded like the harshness of religion was specifically meant for you, and that other people
Yeah.
were to be pitied and prayed for. Well, okay, so you developed a tension around that belief system that ultimately began to make you begin to question. Was there any kind of a defining moment in the change, or was it like droplets of water filling up a lake sort of a thing, just happened over time and then it burst forward? What were the defining moments that led you to begin to really question your current framework?
Well, my friend Eve Reel, who a lot of you guys know and have heard of, when she deconverted, that kind of threw me for a loop. Because I know she's a very smart woman, and I know that how much she loved God, because her and I were very, very close. Like, as Christians, we would like debate atheists together and do
Some of
Bible
us
studies.
remember that.
Yeah. And we would do Bible studies together, and like she totally got it. Like, and so when she deconverted, I was like, whoa. So I started kind of looking into things a little bit more, listening to her, but she never pressured me or anything like that. We didn't really talk about it a whole lot because I wasn't even sure how to approach her. Like, I didn't know, because I didn't want to seem like I was preaching at her, because I mean, she already knows, so it was weird. But that led me to start really looking into things, and then I watched that Cosmos: A Space-Time Odyssey show, the whole show. I was hooked, and that is like the defining moment that really like made me take that first step, just one foot out the door. The other foot was still firmly planted in case I was mistaken. But that's what, I when I really understood how evolution really worked, because I really wasn't sure. I mean, I had ideas, but it was all fed to me by, creationists and whatnot. So when I really had it like broken down and explained to me, and I realized, oh, this really could have happened. Like, this makes sense, And then I realized how small the world is, like our planet, and compared to this whole of creation God supposedly made. And I was like, how can God be so small in his moral character and even his end game plan when there's this huge, like, universe filled with space and things going on, and it's active, and I just really felt like, we were small, and the whole biblical God was a very small idea in the grand scheme of things. That's what really did it for me.
Yeah, that must be pretty convincing that what you were being told was incorrect, certainly. Okay, so can I ask you, there is a social benefit and a social cost for believing any given thing, and I'm sure that if you held Christian beliefs, that you built your social networks on relating to people like that, you looked to them for guidance and all of that, and if you shifted your beliefs, then that relationship had to be strained. Did you consider any of the social costs of changing your belief structure? And what were they? What thought process went through your mind, and what were the consequences? What actually happened when you began to shift your beliefs in terms of how it affected your social landscape?
Well, most of my sense of community with Christians was online, because I don't get out much. I didn't have a church I went to because I never felt satisfied with any of the ones I did try to go to. So I pretty much just, fellowshipped online with other Christians and stuff, people I've known for years and years. And then when I deconverted, almost all of those friends slowly just started disappearing. I'd see they unfriended me on Facebook, and you know, a few of them came to me, tried to talk to me and stuff like that. Some of them just completely turned on me, like, in a mean way, like totally started attacking me and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I can literally only name a few that Christians that actually stayed my friend and, you know, understood what I was going through or whatever. And so, yeah, it was rough. Oh, and there's one thing. This was really hard. There was a person on here. He goes by the name Sin City Preacher. He has a YouTube channel. He's been on here for a long time. Him and I got really close, and we would do like weekly Bible studies together on Hangouts. I showed him how to set up Hangouts and everything. I looked at him like an elder in the church. I looked at him like a grandfather almost, because I never had a grandfather. I looked at him as like my spiritual leader, but not in the sense that I, you know, worshipped every word that came out of his mouth. I just, because my husband, he's an atheist, so I didn't have any man figure to kind of help me share this weight of the world I was trying to carry. So him and I got really close, and then when I deconverted, he literally just completely stopped talking to me, like ignored me, like all my attempts to try to talk to him, and that like broke my heart more than probably anything. So that was really rough. So
Yeah, what kind of an emotional investment do you think he might have had in the relationship in terms of, I know that if you take an interest in coaching someone, that you have a vested interest and emotional stake in their success, and maybe he felt like that too. And I'm not trying to, I don't know the guy, I don't know how it worked, and I'm hearing your side, but I'm betting that on his side he might have had some difficulty processing what to him was a fairly devastating turn of events.
well, yeah, a lot of I'm assuming this is just a complete guess, but excuse me. He probably thought that I either was never saved, because this is what they think. Like, if you
I
turn
heard
from
that many
Christ,
times.
yeah, if you turn from Christ, then obviously you never were. He was never there.
But that's one of those loophole passages they use to justify their own insular thinking.
Yeah.
Well, you were never a Christian.
Yeah. So it's either that, or there's another part of Scripture that talks about when somebody is backslidden, like heavily backslidden, you're supposed to completely leave them alone. Dust your feet off.
Turn them over to the apostate state.
Yes. Yep. And so it was either one of those. I mean, that's literally what every single Christian I was friends with had to process. It was either one of those. Was she ever saved? Or, and as you guys know, there's still several Christians, well, a few that I'm sort of still friends with that still think I'm saved. They're in the camp that, oh, she's just heavily backslidden.
Yeah.
So, and I don't mind that. At least they're not.
Those would be the Calvinists. The once you're in, you're in, right?
Yeah, most of them. Well,
Assuming
like
you're one of the elect.
Well, there's
Right,
there's universal salvationists, or those that lead toward the liberal, and Jesus would understand if you backslid. You know, the Ken doll Jesus sort of thing, where that Jesus would understand why you backslid and all of that.
Can I toss a question in here, Joe? You were talking earlier about some of the things you processed when you were a Christian, about always feeling that paranoia that, you know, like Jesus is always watching and listening. I know in many, many cases, people have a real hard time giving that threat of hell, that threat of being wicked and evil and sinful up, because it's so ingrained and so, you believe that so much about yourself that you're always clinging to this salvation thing. And I know you've got something to say about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm still dealing with it. Still, it was a constant battle. It was awful. The past year, since I have year and a half now, the very beginning of my deconversion was wonderful, because I didn't stress about it anymore, like at all. Well, I mean, at the very first I did. I was scared shitless.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I was more comfortable with myself, like trusting. See, I had to go from trusting God this God that I had created,
Mm-hmm.
to trusting myself. And in that, I realized that I was really my own God, because he wasn't a whole lot different than me.
Right. And that's
And
generally what he is. So yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so once that like excitement of being free from the sin and hell and all of this weight, it was great for a while. And then, but now I've noticed the past like year, so I'll give it like the past year, I have been dealing with a lot of guilt issues.
In
Like,
what sense?
like, I don't know, feeling like I'm a bad mother, like I'm screwing everything up, like my kids are going to need therapy, you know, feeling like a bad wife, like I'm not doing enough with my life. My life is so short now. I really got to get stuff done because I don't have this afterlife to go to anymore. So I don't know. It's like I turned the God guilt that I was doing to myself into like just a personal thing that I'm dealing with within myself. And I don't know if that, I have to believe that that had to do with living my life thinking I'm a piece of shit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having a hard time, like, I don't know, with that. So I'm actually like going to be starting to see a therapist pretty soon to talk about this stuff, because I mean, I know that there was a lot of damage done to my mind and the way that I process things, and so I think that seeing someone for a little bit might actually help me out. So I'm going to be starting that real soon. That'll be good.
Make sure he's an atheist.
Oh, I absolutely will. I am not going to go to any kind of religious person whatsoever. That's going to be the first question
Right.
I'll ask them that on the phone when I'm calling around.
Yeah.
So,
so I guess.
Well, I want, if you don't mind, just
go ahead.
comment on what you had said earlier. I think that, at least as far as I understand, the emotional echoes that you're used to doing like, over and over again, the patterns that you develop in your brain, do have a tendency to have almost like a physics about them. They have behavioral momentum. They have, and if you've done them for a long time, they develop mass and inertia. And so the fact that you intellectually crossed a threshold does not necessarily mean that that emotional threshold comes immediately with that, and that it does take a while for that radioactive half-life of those guilt ideas and so forth to begin to burn out of your emotional identity, which is sort of different than your cognitive. Just for sharing my perspective there. Sorry, James.
No, that makes sense. And now I don't have Jesus to put all my stuff on. I actually have to process all of this stuff now.
Now your own shit.
I have to deal with my shit. I have to figure out, why do I have this guilt problem where I just feel so depressed all the time? Not all the time. It comes and goes. Like I have like mood swings and shit. So I might even have like bipolar or something going on.
Probably not. It's like we were talking about earlier. Like you grew up Baptist, you fundamental. That's still one of the fundamentalists, and they heavily teach you that you're a worthless piece of shit except for Jesus, right? That you can deny the Jesus part and get rid of the religion, but that meant that mind state of you're not worth anything. That's the hard part. I mean, that's why you see a lot of angry atheists out here, is because a lot of us grew up fundamental and we realized that we were fucked over.
Well, I think an element of it too may be, especially for people that were exposed to church that had that real dichotomy of in-group and out-group, and the out-group is sinner and outcast and burn in hell. The emotional sense of self that develops in that sort of a climate doesn't necessarily go away once you transition to a new ideology.
Of course not.
You could then just recast the church as the devil and science is God. And I think that there's a danger perhaps of doing that in order to just maintain that emotional language that you learn in your developmental environment.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, go ahead, Joe. You got the next one.
Okay, so all right, so we have a pretty good framework for the beliefs that you held and how they were formed and and also the questioning process that came up and its social impact. What can you describe? Okay, so we've described what you did believe. What do you now believe? Where are you at now?
Right now, I do not believe in any gods at all. I feel like I don't have enough reason to warrant even questioning if there is one. However, there's one little thing that makes me wonder, and that is if human beings really are so much more special than every other life that's on the planet. So I'm currently kind of looking into that. I'm starting to see that no, we're not really, because I'm seeing a lot of similarities between us and other things in nature and stuff. So, so I guess I'm an atheist. I kind of lean towards agnosticism a little bit because I have this. This is what I put in my mind, that okay, even if we figure out what caused the Big Bang to happen, even if it was God, whatever it was, there was a cause for it. And I know some people don't agree with that and they think there was no cause. I think that's bullshit. Obviously something happened that made everything go boom. So
physicists can explain that to you better than we can.
Okay. But my thing is, like, once we find out what caused that bang to happen, that begs the other question, okay, well, what caused that to happen? And it's infinite.
There doesn't, well, we're not going to get into that tonight. There doesn't have to be an infinite regress there.
Oh,
the more we learn about quantum, the more things come into existence and disappear. It's not hard to figure out, start making those connections. Like,
okay.
There's lots of information out there. You start Googling this stuff, and you'll see papers written about this stuff.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm gonna look, because
there are answers. They're not complete answers, but we have a good understanding of it. Doesn't have to be caused. Mm-hmm. Ozzy and I can't remember. They had a debate about a discussion about cause and effect, and you don't necessarily, an effect has to have a cause, but a cause doesn't have to be caused. It can just happen. So we think it has to have some purpose or something behind it, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, so there's a philosophical position that goes, I'm going to try to put it into regular language here, that goes something like this, that cause can appear to us the same way that the sun appears to us, to rise in the east and set in the west, just predicated on our perspective. But from other perspectives, there can be things that are opposed to each other that actually are both true. So they call that dialectism, I think. But be that as
I can't remember.
Yeah, be that as it may, if we go down that rabbit trail, we'll be kind of lost. But I do share your wonder at, wow, this thing we call reality that we have not yet cornered the market on insight in terms of understanding is an awesome place. And the answers that I was given that afforded me certainty were not, they didn't hold up. But the answers that I now hold may have an element of uncertainty, but they also have an element of exploration, that I can now explore governing myself with things that are hinged to reality as opposed to hinged to authority structures and things like faith and all of those abstractions. And I think that is what you're describing as the sort of mindset that you have now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, another thing is that I definitely don't believe in any kind of theistic God. I don't think there's any God that interacts with us at all. And if there is, he obviously doesn't care about pain and suffering and dealing with that issue. So therefore, I couldn't worship him even if he existed. So there's that. And then also, like, the only thing that would probably convince me that there was a God, or one of the things, I used to think this, but I don't now, is if he appeared to me and said, hey, I'm God, nice to meet you, or something like that. But then after thinking about that for a little while, I realized that I can't trust that. Like, I can't trust my own brain because, we know for a fact that things can cause hallucinations and all of that. So I guess I don't even know if we could possibly even know if there was a God or not.
Yeah, so you're recognizing the certainty of uncertainty that even our senses
Yeah.
could be questioned, and they
Yeah.
provide their own sort of rendering.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that position because, I mean, realistically, that's the most honest position. We just don't know. And I try to explain this. I call myself an atheist only because none of the gods that I've read about or been told about exist, and there's no evidence that they exist. So that makes me technically an atheist. Do I believe a God exists? Well, I'm not saying there isn't, but show me one and I'll believe it. So I don't know. That's the ultimately the true answer, but nobody's shown me one that exists yet. So that's why it's easier for me to just say I'm just an atheist. I just don't believe in any of them.
So how would you say your life has changed since you've changed your beliefs? Is it for the better? Is it for the worse? Is it different? And if so, in what way?
I think there are some good things and some difficult things. The good things are that I am a little more proactive in my life. I'm not like sitting around waiting to die. I know that sounds terrible, and it wasn't like that. It's not like I was just sitting around. But that's what I was thinking. So anytime anything bad happened or I was dealing with it, I was like, oh, this is just temporary. I'm not of this world, you know. So not having that has been kind of hard. But I think I'm handling it okay. And I'm also, like I said, I've realized that my life is very short. I mean, I feel like I'm on my way out. Like I only got a good 30, 40 years left. And so I'm trying to make the best of it. And I have like goals and dreams and things that I never really considered before, or never spent too much time worrying about, because I didn't want to seem worldly, because that was a sin. You don't want to be of the world. So I don't think about that anymore, which is great.
It's quite a trap, isn't it?
Yeah. You're stuck no matter what you do. It's terrible. So I'm much more free.
In retrospect, you see a lot of the ideas.
I can't hear anything.
Oh, you froze up again, Joe. They'll be right back. So I guess I know I hear it so many times. We grow up with a belief about ourselves and about our world and about what's real and what isn't real, what is true and what isn't true, and then all of a sudden we find something that brings all those things into doubt. For you, it was Eve's deconverting, because you have this great immense respect for her, and seeing her go through it, you went, holy, there's something to this, because she's not this flighty girl that people up here thought she was. She's a heavyweight in your eyes. So you have someone who you respect went through this and said, that stuff I used to believe, I don't believe it anymore. And, so it makes you question everything you've been taught. So a year and a half time frame, you're still not out of it in those senses, because you're still adjusting your beliefs is that word, to what you now are trying to figure out is what we call reality. And like you said, we really don't know. Our senses can be lying to us. So we do the best we can. And you're still in that process. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how hard is it for you when you come up against something that goes against everything you learned? And then do you still feel that first reaction going back to that Baptist route? Or have you come past that? You don't measure everything against that anymore?
Could you give me one example of what you mean?
Okay, we'll use something sort of, the death penalty. Say something like that, where you have, as a Christian, you have, well, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, blah, 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 blah. They make all these things. But, from what we know about psychology now and the way people think, that's probably not the best way to handle these things. So do you still find yourself measuring things like that against what you know to be from the Bible or your perspective you grow up with, that kind of a thing?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
actually used to be against the death penalty as a Christian because I thought that, you know, since Jesus came and decided stoning and killing wasn't the way to go, I thought that nobody had the right to take a life. So
Mm-hmm.
but now, I mean, I do have a problem with like killing people and stuff like that, but it makes more sense to me now. Like if you have the serial
Right.
killer or whatever that's gonna keep doing it, then, you know. But I guess, I don't know. I'm still conflicted with that.
Yeah.
I'm still pro-life. I was pro-life as a Christian. I'm still pro-life now, but for different reasons. Um, yeah. I'm different with the way my children go to school, like what they're taught in school. I used to always have a problem with certain science things they were taught and all
Of
that. 'Cause
course.
my daughter would come home from school talking about dinosaurs. I'm like, well, we don't really know if they really existed. I mean, I told her this stuff, and I felt really bad for that for a long time, but I'm
But those
over it.
toys are so cute.
I know, they're so adorable. Little
And
Earth.
they're made out of dinosaur bile.
Yeah.
So, I got the impression when you were describing the situation as sort of the lament of having been in that ideology for so long that you kind of feel, if I'm not mischaracterizing what I heard, like you would have shifted your life in gear to be doing things that had more meaning and more substance throughout your life now, and you would have been further along now, and you kind of have a regret. Is that an accurate picture?
Sort of. Um, I still, like, as a Christian, my life was focused on helping people. Like, that's what I felt like my purpose was for. I'm supposed to be the salt of the earth. I'm supposed to make this horrible place that we're stuck in more palatable for the people who don't have Christ. Like, that was what I thought my job was. And I still can be some salt, and I still am, and I still help people, maybe even a little more now, because uh, there was a time where, like when I was a Christian, I might not help certain people because I thought that they were a lost cause, or that God was letting them go through some hard times for a reason. And now I don't think about any of that. Like if somebody needs help, I'm going to do what I can to help them. So it's changed me in that regard, which I think is so much better.
Right. Well, what I was hearing you say was that you have a brief period of time in which to cultivate and bear fruit in this life, and that you had a different sort of time frame when you were a Christian as opposed to now. And I think that I heard you saying that that affects your thinking now, and I didn't know if there was any kind of a backtrack on that, like maybe you regretted some of the ways that your previous thought patterns and beliefs shaped how you related to the world.
Oh yeah, there is one specific thing. This was a big thing. I actually, I had two children, and I was, getting up close to being 30, and I always wanted to try to go for a son because I had two daughters, and I knew, like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it before I get too old. But I thought we were in the end times. I thought that we didn't have much longer, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to bring a child into this world when, all hell's going to break loose on earth pretty soon. And there's even a verse in the Bible that talks about, and Jesus said this. He said, "Woe, woe to any mother who gives suck in those days," meaning has a baby or a toddler in those days. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not going to. But
Red Earth rules.
yeah, so then I finally stopped thinking that and all that, and I decided like to go ahead and have my son, and I'm so glad I did because
Mm-hmm.
he's wonderful. So that's a big deal. Like I was like gonna not have any more kids and stuff, just because of the way I was thinking. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy
So
to
your
me.
belief system paralyzed you, literally paralyzed you from the
Literally,
thing you
yes.
really wanted.
Yep, it did.
So, silly question. If you could hold one thing, one belief, if you could bring from what you used to believe into now, What would you bring forward with you, if anything?
That there is a heaven that we all go to,
That
and
we all end up there.
that we all go to heaven, and that the parts of the Bible that talk about, because you can defend this from any position with the Bible.
Well, absolutely you can.
So the parts about how everybody goes to heaven, how Jesus died for the sins of the world. And so, yeah, that if we all went to heaven and I was going to live forever. See, the thought of living forever, I like that idea. I know a lot of people don't, but I do. I want to live forever. I feel like there's so much I haven't learned yet, and I want to learn. I want to know everything that there is to know.
But other than that, you're just a simple girl.
Yeah, you know. So I'm like constantly just thinking about things like that. And so living forever and with my loved ones, that would be, and, you know, like I was saying earlier, I do kind of miss the comfort that God would give me, because he did. He comforted me sometimes. Or my,
well, you thought he
did.
Yeah.
I was comforting myself.
Yeah. Oh, I get that. I understand that feeling. I really do.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's what I need. I know I'm kind of sidetracked, but I think that's what I need to do, is I need to learn how to comfort myself in non-destructive ways. Like, you know what I mean? Because I have an addictive personality, so you can see how that could go wrong real quick.
I know all about those.
That's been a struggle, but, yeah, I'm slowly getting there.
Yeah, I think a good start would be to fire yourself from being qualified to condemn you.
Well,
like that.
Yeah, that is, unfortunately, that's the only way you never really self-evaluate, you self-criticize. And that's one of the things that most religious people do really well, is they eviscerate themselves, but they never have any grace on themselves, but they can have grace for everybody else, because in our brains, we're wicked and evil, but for God, right?
So do you have any, now I want to ask this question differently, but the question is really, do you have any regrets? But I want to qualify that to say, was there anything about your previous mindset and social network and the way that it worked that you could bring forward with you? In other words, that really was solid, even despite the way that it was structured with certain beliefs and ideologies, and that was the glue. But just the way that it happened, are there anything about that previous position that you would really like to have now? And if so, what is that and why?
Yes, and I figured I still have it, but I was mischaracterizing where it was coming from, like you just explained. This and I over evaluating everything in the past year and a half, I figured out that this is actually what I thought was my real spiritual connection with God, and here's what it is: my love for people. Like, I just love people. I don't mean to sound like a hippie or anything, but when I was focused on that, when I was a Christian, like loving everyone and looking at people through the eyes of Jesus, and I always thought Jesus was this wonderful, loving, he, you know, would look at us and not see our sin and not see anything wrong with us or whatever. I used to look at people that way too. It was hard sometimes, but sometimes I was able to actually do it, and it was really great. And I would have like a physical response to that. I would sometimes get like goosebumps, or, you know, a physical feeling like in my stomach a little bit sometimes, or whatever. And it was that love. And then when I felt that as a Christian, I was like, oh, this is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's moving me right now. But then, of course, I figured out that now that I'm not a Christian, I still get that. And when I realized that, I was very, very excited and happy that I still had that it was. So that's why I kind of think that it was like this whole love, like actual love that I was, that kept me connected with God. And I still have love that didn't go anywhere. So.
Very nice. If there's anything that you could take from your current belief structure and bring it back to the one that you had, that you felt like would be very influential and useful if it were embraced. Not that it would be, but if it were embraced, what would that be? What thing do you know now that you feel like your former social network would really benefit from?
I cannot think of a single thing. Because everything would contradict it.
Oh yeah, I'm not asking you to figure out a way to make that happen, to make it believe. But in other words, what I'm asking is, what do you have now that's really valuable that you wish that social network could also have, regardless of the barrier to convincing?
Right. Oh man, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Um, well, not this judgment, because as a Christian, you're forced to see things in black and white, and now I don't do that, and I think that would help. That would have helped a lot for there not to be such a black and white thing when it comes to God and sin and people and all of that.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, that was the end of the question set that we really had like tagged for everyone. I want to definitely thank you for sharing your story, the arc of the story. Is there anything that you would like to add to encourage somebody who maybe is struggling with beliefs that you wish you could have had for the transition process that would have made it a little easier?
I would. One thing that really helped me during my transition period was hanging around people, non-believers, getting their perspective, who were actually nice and patient, and because I had a lot of questions when I was first even considering the idea that God wasn't real, and the community, like here in Google Plus, helped me so much. Like, I didn't feel any kind of like condemnation, or I didn't feel stupid for some of the questions I was asking, and I was asking some pretty basic things.
Yeah, we've heard them all before.
Yeah, so
I remember.
so having that, community helping me out and just kind of like holding my hand through it, supporting me, like it's okay, really helped me a lot. So I would just recommend that, for one, don't be scared of the truth, because even if the biblical God is real, he is supposed to be truth. So there is nothing to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
And that went on for me the last year of my Christianity, which gave me the motivation and took away the fear for me to actually look into some of this stuff.
Right.
So just realize that the truth, there's nothing wrong with the truth, and to keep looking for it, and don't be scared of it. Not everything's a conspiracy, I think people give humanity and groups way too much credit, So yeah, just find a community that opposes your views that can actually have a civil conversation, and I think that would help a lot.
Good deal. I'm curious. How has your relationship with exploring nature from a non-religious perspective gone? In other words, prior to this, what you could believe and what you couldn't believe was restrained by the text, the Bible, and the interpretation of that, I assume, of the local religious sect that you belong to. But now it's wide open. And what have you discovered? I'm curious if you've discovered things about nature that you have changed your relationship with, and more specifically, do you find it a wonderfully exciting thing to engage in and explore, or is it kind of the same? Or
Oh, it's completely different. As a Christian, I got to the point, literally at the last few months of my Christianity, where I was trying to figure out, because I had come to the point where I believed I wasn't scared of truth, okay? And I was really interested in nature and how things work. That was considered a truth to me because it really happens. And so I looked into if eternal life actually made any sense in nature, okay? Now I'm doing this as a Christian. And I got to the point where I thought, yes, it does, because what we see throughout nature is this will to survive no matter what, survival. And so it made sense to me that eternal life could exist because humans want to survive, and so that meshed well with nature. So I really thought that for a little bit. But now, of course, I look at it and I can see that it's because of evolution, and that's the reason we actually came up with God ourselves.
Yeah, we do have this struggle with causation and correlation really, really intensely. In fact, if we jump to conclusions, we're more likely to survive. If we believe whatever our tribe has believed, then we're more likely to be accepted, and that's a necessary thing as well. So I would imagine that just the way that you said that your religion looked like you, I think that religion itself looks like the culture it was born into, and you know, in the context of where they were. So, for instance, the reason a cow is perhaps sacred in one location is because if you kill the cow, you are not going to have anything to plow the field with next year, and the famine will even be stronger. You intuitively know that, and so therefore it's sacred. And if you live in a desert, pigs are bad because they eat the same thing you do, first of all, and second of all, they don't keep well, and if you don't have refrigeration, so therefore they're bad kind of stuff emerges, as well as all of the local things that happen. So you know, the same way you said your religion looked like you, I think that religions look like the culture that they've gone through.
Yeah. Another thing also within nature that I look at differently now is I didn't realize when I was a Christian that there are homosexual tendencies within other species, and that's one thing that disproves God right there, because animals, according to the Bible, do not have a soul. When they die, they go back into the ground and they're done. So how can an animal have this abomination characteristic about it that humans have to wear? It just didn't make any sense to me. So there was that.
1,500 species so far.
Yeah. And there's that, and then learning about how life really started, and how that single. This is just cool to me. I'm a dork, I know, but we know
Dorks
of the moment.
Cool.
I know, I love.
You're amongst dorks.
I knew I liked you guys, but like we know about the first time that there was a life, and I don't know if it was a single cell, or I don't think it was, but where it started to see light. Like, it didn't even process it. It just knew if there was light and if there was dark. And some of these things started going towards the light, and some of them went towards the dark. I don't know, I sound like I'm preaching, but that was cool to me because that pinpoints the time that life started to actually make decisions. We can track that now. And that's a big deal to me, because I'm one of those people who took the Bible literally. The Bible said God created the earth in 6 days. He rested on the seventh. So much so, and all these people who say, oh, Genesis is just, it's an
allegory or a myth.
Yeah.
That
doesn't fly. That doesn't fly because God made the 10 Commandments, and in the 10 Commandments he said to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. So he wanted us to know that it took 6 days and he rested on the seventh, like literally. And it's only because that he backs it up in the 10 Commandments that I cannot say, oh, it's all allegory and stuff like that. So once I realized that evolution was true, that it really did happen that way or something like that, completely, I couldn't trust the Bible anymore, because I have to, in order for me to believe the Bible and the God of the Bible, I have to be able to trust that completely, and I cannot do that. Like, I haven't even gotten to Jesus yet. I haven't even thought about Jesus yet. I'm still dealing with the Old Testament, the first few books.
Yeah.
So
you, growing up with your Baptist upbringing, you were a biblical inerrantist.
Oh, absolutely.
The Bible had to be right. It couldn't be
Oh, it
wrong.
had to be. And the people who don't think it is irritate me because I don't understand how they can put
Make any
so
claims.
put so much faith in so many different things
Yeah.
on something that they know they can't trust. Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't
Well,
make any sense to me.
but they don't see it that way. I've talked to many of them, and they find ways to justify their belief by running circles around themselves.
But
Again,
for
it's about
I,
belief, right?
I also think that there's a social aspect to belief. So if you believe something, you belong to the group. You know, Andy writes his name on your shoe, so to speak. If you know, as a Toy Story reference. But uh, the bottom line is there is a cost also to not believing the way your group does. And I know that the Ash experiments done, I think back in the 60s or 70s, with just lines of different lengths, and they were just asking, is this line longer than this line? And they had a lot of plants in the room, and whenever the room went with, no, this line is longer than that line, the people would have a tendency to want to belong, and so they would just pick what it would be that was acceptable to the group as opposed to what it is that they probably actually saw, although nobody can really get gain a perspective on what the people saw at the time. But the point being that social proofing is a real strong aspect to why we forge beliefs. I think that is very neglected. We have this polite fiction that we can operate by logic, and as soon as we find and discover something and somebody makes a good argument that will change our beliefs, and I think we hold on to our beliefs for emotional reasons that we oftentimes aren't even able to articulate, much less recognize why they project that thing onto our lens that we refuse to give up, because we would have to pay so much socially if we took on a different mantle.
Yep. I actually have an example of a time where, and this was when I was like just getting back into Christianity, so I was about 26, and it was only because my sister converted to Islam, and that made me question my Christianity because she was convinced Allah was God, and I was like, okay, let me see about this. So, and I didn't know anything about Islam, like hardly anything at all. So I started looking into that, looking at a bunch of things. It ultimately ended up, all the conspiracy stuff I saw ended up leading me to Christ. So I was stuck on Christ for a little bit. My neighbor was a pastor of a charismatic church, okay? And I didn't know anything about charismatic people either at the time. So I went to their church. Like, they were knocking on the doors right within my complex, and I went outside because I was like, those are church people. And I went out, I was like, are you guys church people? Do you have a church? And they were like, yeah. They thought I was crazy, I'm sure. But I was like, oh, cool, because I've been looking, and I don't know what's going on, but I love God and all this. And so they thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. So I come to their church, and all of a sudden, everybody starts like, and like rocking back and forth. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so I talked to the pastor about it, and I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, this is, see here in Acts chapter 1 and 2 and all. I think that's where it's at, where it talks about speaking in the tongues and stuff. And I was like, okay. And then I read it more and saw that it wasn't talking about that babbling. It was talking about an actual language that they were speaking. But anyway, here's my point. I went to a big meeting. Like, they had their little church that only consisted of maybe 20 people, and then on Monday nights they would go to this huge, like, auditorium places where all the charismatic people would meet once a week. And there was a preacher woman up there, and there was even a guy in a wheelchair, and they were like carrying him around and stuff, trying to get him to walk. Well, my neighbor, the wife, pulled me up to the front where all the people were, and everybody's like, ah, and I'm crying. Because I don't know what the hell, I don't know. I started crying. I was just feeling emotional, like I don't know what the fuck was going on. She pulled me up there. They all put their hands on me and stuff. And they're like, just go with it, just go with it. And I'm sitting there, and I remember praying in my head. I was like, God, I don't know what the hell's going on, but if this is real, like if speaking it, because she had me convinced that if I didn't speak in tongues, then I wasn't actually baptized by
weren't
the Holy
saved.
Spirit yet. Right. So I was like, God, please, if this is real, then I'm asking you for the gift of tongues if it's real. And then I remember like this complete silence coming over me. Nothing happened. And then that was it, and I went home. I didn't fake it or anything like that, but I think that's what they do. I think they fake. I think they mimic each other, because there's nothing to it. Like it's all bullshit. So I don't know. That was just something that happened to me, and I never went back there again. And I challenged them on it too, but they didn't like that, so we stopped talking. But
It doesn't take long when you challenge them.
yeah, exactly.
My sister actually had the same problem. She's a Baptist, but she doesn't go to church anymore because every single church that she went to, at least here, had a problem with her, I guess, liberal beliefs. She's one of those liberal Christians, you know what I mean?
Yes, a non-fundy Jesus loves really actually does love everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. So when
Yeah, like
you can read the Bible very easily and see that what he did on the cross was literally for everybody, all done. It's all paid for. But
like I think I recently came out as bisexual to all my family, and she
right.
was one of the first ones to accept it. So yeah.
She's very liberal.
Yes.
Well,
No
that's
wonder
good.
she couldn't find a church. Yeah, those are hard to find. Those kind.
So
I think churches have been changing because they used to be able to inherit just automatically the next generations. There was no motivation to change, but now you have a bunch of, and I've heard them pejoratively called by people in the Christian faith, happy clappy churches that sort of.
I lost you, Joe.
No, you don't got any audio, do you, buddy?
He'll be right back. Yeah, like I was a worship leader at an evangelical Pentecostal type church, so I've seen it all. I've been there through it, sat through it all. I was actually going to be a music pastor before I suddenly realized it was all bullshit. So yeah, I've been in churches like that, and I've been there. That was my life.
I've never been a part of any organized religion. The furthest I've ever gone to is I am I guess you can say, a former deist.
Right. How do you make the jump from? Okay, let's explore that. You mind if we talk to atheists for a bit, Tonya?
No, go
Okay,
ahead.
how did you come to your belief in deism? Let's start with that. Like, how did you become a deist? I'm always amazed to hear these.
For me, again, this is when I was young. I'm only 24 now, but
You're so
when I
old.
was young, I know. I guess for me, I would look around the universe, think, probably what a lot of people think today, that there's no way this happened, quote unquote, by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's where I get my deism from. And my personal thing is that my personal deistic belief was that none of the religions had it right, and that the only thing God would care about is whether or not you lived a moral life.
Mm-hmm. That's sort of like what Shanna believes.
Yes.
So, and that's that I would have no problem with that at all. Like, many people believe the same thing. Like, I'm not against the position that there could be a God. That might actually explain a few things, but I'm not willing to go there anymore. But that's just me. So how do you go from this force that's just kind of there and this benevolence and starting things up and leaving? How do you go from there to becoming the atheist ranger?
You know what? Call me a typical atheist, but it was mainly evidence. I never saw any evidence for any God, let alone the deist God. But I'm pretty much in the same boat. I'm not against there being a God, but to take a page out of David Silverman's book, until a God appears before me, fiction is fiction.
So, Tonya said the same thing too. So there's a lot of people. Matt Dillahunty says the same thing too. if God knows everything about me, He knows what kind of evidence I would require to believe in Him. So, and
Exactly.
I'm still waiting.
Yeah, but I mean, even if I were to believe in God again, I would not go to any of the religions. As far as I'm concerned, they all have it wrong. I would just go back to being a deist.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I noticed that, Ranger, you mentioned that the only thing that this deist God might worry about is if you live a moral life. That sounds a lot like theism to me, sort of.
I
I'm
know, I
just
get that a
wondering,
lot, but again, that was just my personal belief.
is that what most deists think, though? They connect morality to their God?
Uh, I can't even say most. I'm just the ones I've talked to. Again, when I was a deist, the ones I talked to where I lived at.
Oh, okay, okay.
Most deists tend to be very secular because they believe that God is a force. He started it all up. Like if you talk to Shanna about this, she'll tell you the same thing. Her God, she believes, is the force behind everything, and then He's no longer involved. And our belief, our morality, is a social thing. We've constructed the life the way we are. And most of the founding fathers of your country were deists. And so
Yeah.
that's why morality is heavy on the individual. Not the state isn't mandating or legislating morality. The Constitution relies on this is where the Christians jump in and say, well, our God is the moral impetus. But they really believed on the integrity of the person to give basis for the republic to survive. That's how it works. It doesn't work any other way, as you can see by its falling apart. So.
Yes.
I do think the deist position, I can empathize with a deist position, honestly, because, and if you count God to be synonymous with nature, there are some questions, and this, frankly, is why I'm in the agnostic camp so firmly, because I can't really answer this, is that we have intelligence. We use a currency of meaning to communicate back and forth, and that is natural. And I don't know on what scales that happens, other than my own limited perspective, which I know I have a limited view. But it does happen. That's a fact, because it happens in me and the people around me and so forth. So I can understand how this notion that there could be something greater could be engaged and entertained.
Well, I mean that's why I do honestly respect deists and even spiritualists more, because when it comes to evidence, at least they admit, hey, we're believing this just because we want to believe it.
Well, Shanna has evidence. I don't agree with it, but she's got evidence. So
I don't agree with it either.
Do you know what Shanna's evidence is? I'm curious.
It's easier if she says it all, if you ask her personally, because there's a lot of different pieces she puts together to a puzzle. Some of it's on a quantum level and all this other stuff. So she's just the way she's put it all together to her makes sense. So it's easier to, maybe we can have that conversation one day with her too. That would be fun, actually.
Yeah.
I love talking to her about this stuff. She knows I laugh at some of it, so.
Yeah, I'm a little less willing to laugh things off, only because I know how much we don't know appears to me to be much greater than how much we do know, and so I just want to be honest about my predicament.
Well, we can. I can definitely try and set something up if the three of you want to have a discussion with her. I'm pretty sure she'd be open to it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we can talk about that later off.
Sure. Yeah. So,
yes.
How long have you declared yourself atheist now?
I've been an atheist since I was 16.
8 years. Okay.
Is there any social cost?
I was just going to ask that question.
We can't hear you.
Was there any social cost? How did it cost you friends, families, relatives, jobs, any of that stuff?
I think there haven't been too many bad experiences for me, except I think one time in the Special Olympics, before a game, well, the night before Special Olympics game, the coach would get us all together and pray. Made me feel uncomfortable, so I asked to leave, and the coach pretty much got snippy with me and got angry with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sensing that you live in the South somewhere.
No, I live in Delaware.
Wow. The ones who just declared Darwin Day?
Yeah, I guess so, yes.
Bizarre. I would never have thought that.
But no, not personally. I mean, I have gotten into arguments with my, the sister I brought up earlier, but at that time she was more hardcore than she is now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty much it. But to answer your question shortly, no, not really.
Yeah, and religious flavor in Delaware and Pennsylvania and a lot of places in the East, it is there are pockets of it, but there are some assertive pockets.
Yeah. Well, luckily for me, I didn't grow up in a religious home, so
Right.
yeah.
What sealed the deal for you? What made you say, okay, none of this, it's that?
Well, again, the reason I switched to deist to atheist is because, for me, it's mainly evidence. The lack thereof, I should say. Like I said, I'm probably in the same boat with David Silverman. Until a God appears before me, fiction is fiction.
Mm-hmm. So have you been? I guess you grew up with a fairly skeptical mind. Is science involved in your life heavily?
Um, Hard to say. I mean, I do read science books, but I'm really not that good at articulating it. I'm more into history.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I mean, to me, that's the best way to attack the holy books of today. Because most of them, when it comes to the historical part, they either don't match or it's non-existent.
Right.
Have you
Or
found
go ahead.
the things that you've discovered? I assume they're convincing to you, but have you found that they are convincing to people who believe differently?
Some of the time, not most of the time, especially on the Google Plus area.
Well, how would you characterize the way what you think is a sound argument stacks up to somebody that is holding a belief?
Honestly, when they start being defensive, for me, like I always bring up my favorite contradiction to bring up is the Judas contradiction.
Where it's different in two of the Gospels.
Yeah,
Yes.
he buys a field and kills himself and being hung, and then somebody else buys the field and he's hurled off headlong down the hill into it.
Yes, and that's my favorite contradiction to bring up. And as far as I've been bringing it up, not a single Christian Catholic has been able to tell me which one of them happened because they don't know.
Yeah, there's lots of places like that. So.
Have you ever spoken to Seamus about that?
No, I have not.
Okay. Now, I don't know that he has an answer. I just know that he has a passion for searching that kind of stuff out and sort of comparing texts.
And I also love to bring up Noah's Ark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree. There's lots of things that don't make sense in when you just read the text. So I can understand that. So, you changed as a young man. So, how does what you believe now? How do you use the base of your non-belief in that sense? How does that affect everything you do these days? Does it make any difference in your life, or is it something it's always in your head?
It's not always in my head, but as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to my time on this earth, most likely I'm only going to live once, so I want to live as good as life as I can here.
And what does that mean?
Meaning, try to, treat my family well, treat what little friends I have well, and maybe if I'm lucky, meet the right girl or guy.
Hey, Christian. Or both.
Yes, exactly.
Welcome, Christian. How are you today? Or it's probably morning for you, isn't it?
Just turned into the afternoon.
Oh, that's
12
after
o'clock.
7. It's 7, almost 7:30 here. So yeah.
You must
So
be what mid to east
7:30.
coast?
It's 7:30 for me. I'm in Central Canada.
Central. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're talking about beliefs and how do we change them if we can, and how do we, what do they do for us?
Baseball bat.
That works.
Sledgehammer.
Are you talking about how they're formed initially, or how they're changed, or both?
I think most time it's just changed with evidence, depending on what you're looking up.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. I don't think that's the case, really, because, and I know that's what you described as your personal story. That is the case, but you have a context with which to experience that. So you didn't have parents that were breathing down your neck and complaining that you were going to ruin Thanksgiving and the sacrament of Easter or any of that thing, and you didn't have, so you were kind of free to use evidence as a platform, but not everybody who lives everywhere around the world has evidence, and I think some are, in fact, would be terrified to even consider the thought of changing their belief because it could cost them their life or their livelihood or their social network.
Or their place in eternity.
Or that, yeah.
So how long have you been, did you grow up Christian, as like religious? Like a name like Christian, I can only imagine one of your parents was.
No, actually, I was named Christian because they liked the name. They pretty much weren't really believers. They just they got me christened because everyone else was getting their kids christened. They maybe went to church once in my entire life, and they sent me to Sunday school, I think, once or twice. But I argued too much with the pastor or whatever you call it, and I vaguely remember going to that. But yeah, it was never. They never really believed in it. It was just something that people did. And then, they just named me that because they liked the name. That's nothing to do with religion at all.
That's amusing. So you've never really been religious?
No. In school, we used to have, like, religious classes. Even though I was in public school, they used to have religious classes. I'd see kids leave the class and go, well, that's interesting. I didn't know I had an option to leave. And they'd talk about the Bible stories and stuff like that. And I end up just arguing with the teachers a lot. And I actually never realized I was an atheist until I come onto YouTube, because I never really watched YouTube, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I come onto YouTube and seen Aaron Ra was the first video I watched, and I was actually scared to watch it to begin with. I thought, oh, he's going to brainwash me, and I watched it and I went, hang on a second, I believe just about everything he does. That means I must be an atheist. But I thought atheist was like a devil worshipper and stuff. Like, I didn't even know what the term meant.
Yeah.
So I was actually scared to even put a label on it.
Okay, so let me ask you kind of what we're talking about is, was there something in your life that you strongly, firmly believed, but now you don't believe? And if so, how did you change your mind? Could be anything, like just anything, like
firmly believed.
Like you believe vaccinations were wicked and evil, and now you don't. Something like that. Could be anything.
I guess I never really believed in anything that was that outlandish, and then suddenly changed the belief. There's probably some small examples I could think of, but
sure, go ahead.
What about Santa?
He's from Australia.
No, I never really believed in that.
Oh, that's child abuse.
Yeah. I know. I used to believe. I used to carry a belief that if somebody mistreated me, I should mistreat them back. And I have changed that belief from if somebody mistreats me, I can choose how I respond, and I can be defensive. But to be offensive just because someone else is being offensive, it seems to me like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, I can be drawn into an argument emotionally. I'm not saying I'm Mr. Perfect Discipline about that, but I know that my go-to position used to be, hey, you mistreat me, game on. But now it's more like, wait a minute, I want to define who I am, and I don't necessarily want to be defined by who someone else is so easily. So I did change that belief.
That's very mature of you.
So let me ask you another question then, Christian. Do you believe that you can change your mind about something that you hold very dear?
Yes.
Is there anything, like, have you seen people do it, or have you done it yourself on anything?
Oh yeah, I actually do it quite regularly. Someone will present an argument, and I go, "Oh, that actually does make sense," and I'll check. Actually, it's a good point. I'm recently into like exercise and dieting and stuff, and I was talking to a friend of mine who was talking about the low carb, high fat diet. And now I had a belief that, as I grew up, and a lot of people did, that it's extremely harmful. You shouldn't be doing that. It's crazy. And it took me probably a good hour conversation to come around, and I did some research myself. Went and looked at the evidence, and it's actually quite compelling. So I did change my mind on that. That was a firm belief I held for 30-some years.
It's very compelling.
Yeah.
That's how I live. I try to. So, hello, Sherry. Sherry, is that right?
Hey, Sherry.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, she just posted that, so it doesn't surprise me. That could get us violated, so you want to turn that off. We don't want to be DMCA'd for broadcasting non-licensed music.
Yeah, definitely not.
Okay, so how do you think a belief is formed, Christian? Like, how do you think we come to believe something?
A few ways. I think if you hear something and it sides with preconceived ideas, you're quickly able to absorb that as a belief, and then it's very hard to shake. I think there's a very good saying I heard 8 years ago that people would rather be right than rich. So people would rather think that they're right about a belief than actually be, in a good place or profitable or better off, even if they're wrong. They'd rather hold on to that belief no matter what. So it depends on how deeply rooted that belief is, but it's more easily taken on board and kept if it's already a bias. Like, it's already a bias that they hold, and then they hear about something, then they'll take that on as belief very quickly. Otherwise, time comes into play. If they hear the same thing day in, day out, all the time, then it can become a belief. Once it becomes a belief, then it's very hard to change.
So you're talking about, like, indoctrination.
Yeah.
Like, if you hear it often enough, you're going to believe it, whether it's right or wrong. You just heard it so many times. Well, it must be right because I've heard it all my life.
Yeah, and they would hear occasionally some compelling, what they think is compelling to them. Yeah, I think with religious beliefs, though, it does come down to the Pascal's wager thing a lot. Like, they go, well, I'm better off believing, because if I'm wrong, well, what doesn't matter, I'm worm food anyway. But if I'm right, I've got paradise.
Right.
So there's a win-win for them.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. And there are a lot of people who hold that as the strongest argument. Well, I might as well believe. I don't find it a compelling argument, but I know why people hold that position for sure.
Yeah, I think that once you hold a belief too, that the confirmation bias thing kicks in. It's almost like some of the things that we believe are almost like stickers on our lens, and so then everything looks like that once we've accepted and adopted something as part of our identity. It sort of shapes what we see rather than we're properly evaluating anymore. So there's probably that kind of a factor going on, where once we adopt the belief, we just believe it, and we continue to believe it.
This doesn't just apply to religious belief either. This is something that we see metamorphosizing into the public relations of all corporations and governments throughout the world. They've learned how to couch things, phrase things. We've seen the movie Inception. They've learned how to subtly lay information in front of us without with it being relatively unimportant and minor, slowly build it up step by step, so that we find ourselves passively believing things without even understanding where the beliefs ever came from.
Yeah.
What was it about Inception? I didn't see the movie. What was it about Inception?
Oh, the idea about Inception, in fact, there are ways to have someone else think, and you can do persuasion, or you can do this technique called Inception, where you set up just the right environmental cues so that the person will make the decision that you want to force them into by themselves, thinking that it was their own idea.
Oh, yeah.
So planting a seed for an idea that somebody else takes hold as their own and grows as their own, which is going to be more deeply rooted than any other idea that could be planted. I'm going to have the most neurological investment, cognitive investment. The best way to do it is to set things up so that people think that it was their own choice and free will choice, free decision. Their own original idea is even better if you can make them feel and believe that it was their own original idea. Then you have got them by the dogma.
Robert J. Liston, who wrote the book on brainwashing not long after World War II, and we're trying to figure out why that all worked, put together 8 characteristics of psychological totalism, he called it, and one of them was what he called mystical manipulation. I forget the exact term, but it had to do with structuring the environment so that people would more readily believe a certain thing. So that's it. How you doing, Seamus?
He's typing. He's not talking right now.
Oh yeah, I was kind of hoping that he could explain, because
His mic set up.
I was getting his mic set up.
Okay. Yeah, well, Atheist Ranger had brought up, I hope you're hearing this as you're setting up your mic, but Atheist Ranger brought up the difference in the story about the Judases, and I thought of you and said you would probably be able to sort of put some illumination on that probably better than anybody else. I certainly have no clue.
I think about Shamos every time I think about Judas too. Just saying. I'm just
kidding. He hangs himself in one, and in the other he's
hurled headlong into the field that he bought, and one the other was bought for him.
Right.
One he hangs himself on, and the other he's hurled headlong into, and his guts spew out all over the place. So you can't die 2 different ways in 2 different places. So, I've heard a lot.
Hey, can you hear me?
I've heard a lot of apologists
Hello?
on this one. Hi, Seamus, we got you. You're there. Go ahead, Seamus.
Okay, I was just trying to test my mic. So
Yep, you're there.
you guys had a question. What about a contradiction in the Gospel of Matthew and the Book of Acts on the death of Judas Iscariot? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
We were talking about the
Sure.
Potter's Field, that and the Potter's Field.
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, simply, I don't think it's a contradiction insofar as I think it can be explained in a non-contradictory fashion and just have the authors highlighting 2 different aspects of his death and the moments before it. So, yeah, I would say that it can be harmonized classically with Judas either hanging himself and him being cut down either before or after he died. It doesn't have to be specific to how you interpret the passage. And then he fell down, his guts burst asunder. Some people make the apologetic that it was because he was already dead and bloated, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, right?
Why do you have to bloat when you die? You only bloat when you're dead, when you're in water. Why would you?
That's why I said it's unimportant to the apologetic whether he was actually dead before he was cut down or not. It's unspecific to the apologetic. For example, he doesn't even have to be dead for him to be cut down and then his bowels fall out. If he fell from some height, so on and so forth. They're in a rocky area out there.
So how do they explain the fact that one passage talks about him buying the field and one of the passages talks about somebody else buying the field?
Right. That would be another thing that people always allege is a contradiction between Judas Iscariot is who bought the potter's field. But I think that upon inspection of the text, I don't think the authors were trying to say or were trying to focus on the person who bought the potter's field. I think what they were trying to focus on is the symbolicness of that money.
In other words, you're saying we can't take it literally.
No. I can explain this if you let me. That reference right there is a reference to something mentioned in the Old Testament. Okay, so they're not focusing on the person that bought the money as much as they're focusing on the money and its role and who it came from, the people that betrayed them. So what each author were focusing on and what they're highlighting is the money that bought the potter's field was both the money that was given to Judas and from the Pharisees. So the money is the same in both cases. And that's what they were meant to talk about in reference to the passage in the Old Testament, which is very vague and merely just talks about people that are going to betray you, are going to buy some field and so on. So I could find the reference in the Old Testament, but I think that is pretty much the best way to explain it. Because if the authors were deliberately meaning to not use it in a prophetic manner, and they were just trying to convey whoever bought or sold the field, then I think you would have an argument perhaps. But it seems to me definitively that they were using in a reference to the Old Testament about that passage, and were focusing on that actual money and where it came from, and that's not disputed, right? We know that the money was both the money that Judas had and gave back and that the Pharisees gave him. Regardless, that was the money that bought the potter's field. And I believe that was the author's intention.
But you can't know that. You can't know his intention.
Well, yeah, you're right. When we interpret things, whether it be something that's heard or something that's read, we always make value judgments based on the context.
But it's still your opinion, right?
Well, I think the best way to put it is a well-reasoned opinion, which is all that, at the end of the day, that's all that any interpretation really is, right? Like everything I've been saying to you for the past however long I've been in this room, you don't know what my intention is. You don't have access to that. But what you do have is a well-reasoned intention and interpretation of what I'm saying. And that's what we deal with on an everyday basis. And yeah. Tonya, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of said it's well-reasoned, because I could see why you would think that, and I think that you're correct in the way that you look at it. But just answer me honestly. Don't you think it's kind of interesting that that's only one contradiction? There are others that you've even debated. There's a lot of issues, and most of the time it takes studying Old Testament scripture and seeing how, what is the saying that the Old Testament is something concealed and the New Testament is something revealed, how you kind of need the Old Testament to define the New Testament. And your ultimate goal is to be trying to learn more about God. So can't you see how maybe people might look at Old Testament things and use that to try to explain these really clear contradictions that we see?
I'm unsure exactly what you're asking there.
Well, let's just try something different. The point of the room that we're having, the discussion we're having tonight, is about beliefs, how we believe stuff, and can we change them. So I guess the question that we started the room with was, is there something that you believe very strongly in your life at some point, and now you don't believe that anymore? It could be anything. Like you used to believe the sun rose in the east or the west. Now all of a sudden, you've changed your point of view and you understand that the sun actually rises in the east and sets in the west, not the other way around. Something like that. Is there anything in your life, Seamus, that you used to hold firmly, but now you don't believe that anymore?
Yeah, like about a million things. I think that's a process of intellectual growth, is us letting go of things that we previously held to better reason beliefs, right? And so that our whole life is the process of doing that. I think every person would have innumerable instances in their lifetime which they've done just that same thing.
Well, how about something like major in your life, like a big thing, something that, like you used to think that if you ran down the hill screaming, that some ghost would come and get you, but you don't believe that anymore. Something like anything. It could be anything. Just one thing, right? You know what I mean? Like, is there anything that you used to hold as you definitely knew it was true, and then all of a sudden you found out that it wasn't?
Well, I never really worked in. Like, for example, when I used to be an atheist, or I guess I wasn't more. I might have been closer to an agnostic. But I wasn't. I didn't hold anything for definite. But I mean, I guess you could consider that perhaps a large change. Like I've only been a Christian for like 4.5 years. So.
Ooh, and what changed your mind? Because that's a change of belief systems, right? What convinced you? What made you go, oh, I don't believe that anymore. Now I believe this. How did you transform?
Well, it's not anything super profound, but basically, in short, the easiest way to describe it would be I had an experience, and I was firmly convicted of the truth of that experience on a level of which that I couldn't question, and I would hold to it as true as any other thing, that as much as any other thing that I thought was true, that I already had previously held to. So whatever happened in that moment was basically just an arbitrary personal experience that pervasively I've felt was the truth more so than anything else I've ever believed or known to be true. And so then since then I've never really looked back, because I mean, beliefs aren't something that we choose. They're something that are formed naturally within us based on the exposure to certain things. And I've never been able to walk.
That's kind of what we're talking about. Do you choose how to believe or not? That's kind of the point of what we've been talking about. This is part of a series of discussions that we're having with people about beliefs and how we believe or why we believe. So you say we can't choose our beliefs. Can you explain what you mean by that? Kind of flesh that out.
Okay, well, there's a word in philosophy called doxastic voluntarism. What it talks about is that basically doxastic is just a word you could use for belief. In voluntarism, it's saying voluntary belief. And I don't think I don't hold to that. I think that it can be proven. Like, for example, if I were to tell you like something crazy, like believe your mother is a teapot, right? Just believe something arbitrary. Just change your belief on this. Change the fact that you know that your mother's a person believes she's a teapot. You can't do it. You can't. You couldn't be forced to upon pain of death or anything. You could pronounce it. You could say so, but you would never believe that. It can't be done. Okay? And so what I take beliefs are something that are imprinted and formed instantly and naturally within you based on the presentation of some experience, right? So whatever that is, You just believe it and you could believe it based on some unjustified experience with little basis and rationality and justification or whatever. You could believe it for really good reasons, but regardless, you believe it because you've been presented with some experience, whether the experience is nothing more than some intuition or feeling that you've procured. But either way, all of those things can't be helped. It just, they form within you. And so if I were to tell you, go ahead and believe Jesus rose from the dead right now, James. Just believe it. You couldn't do it, up until some point where you were given some experience or something that brought you to that belief. So much in the same way, I couldn't believe my mother was a teapot. Is much in the same way why you can't believe Jesus resurrected from the dead. And we can't choose these things. We can't just flippantly say, okay, let me just choose to believe something that I don't know is true, or even if you don't know it's true, that you don't even believe. It's like impossible for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm trying to understand that doxastic volunteerism right now. I've never heard the term, so I'm just trying to understand what it is. Okay, so you don't believe that you don't believe you choose your beliefs, but yet you're able to change your mind about what you believe. How does that work?
Well, you change your mind about what you believe based on some experience that you're exposed to. Like, and that experience, like I said, could be nothing more than just you changing your mind through some intuition or formulating some thoughts together in a link thoughts together in a way that you haven't before, or so on and so forth. So it doesn't have to be any like external experience. It could be completely internal. But up until that point happens, you can't do it. You have to have that stimuli, whether it be internal from your own mind or whether it be external from something.
So it could be something like reading a book or watching a movie or a video or something. Or just
sitting in quiet contemplation, or just sitting to yourself and having your thoughts. And even though you've thought about this many times before, you finally link together a certain coherent set of thoughts that you haven't previously formulated in that way, and then it just clicks for you and say, oh, well, wow. Then that leads you down a path of starting to believe something different, or at least questioning the foundations for holding those beliefs. Right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be an instantaneous process at any.
Mm-hmm. That's fair enough. So I guess it's like I'm trying to. I guess the question then becomes. So you say you can't. I guess it comes down to what do you mean by choose? The word choose, like you don't choose your beliefs, and because it's what do you mean by when you use the word choose?
Well, I was kind of talking about it in the terms of like I don't believe that they can be chosen like arbitrarily in the fact like I was trying to display with choose to believe that your mother's a teacup, or choose to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. I don't think that we can.
What define that word choose then? Because is it an act of will, or is it something other than that?
Well, it doesn't matter exactly which it is. We could just contrast it with what I'm saying it's different from. So there's one in which we could choose it by whichever means possible, and there's another where it's not chosen, and we have no actual decision in the process. It's just formed naturally within us due to exposure to some experience.
Can you describe one? That might help me. One of these non-chosen beliefs that just develop naturally.
Okay. Like if you believe that your grandmother is dead, it's based on the experience of you seeing her be buried and so you can't change that based on, if I can't just say just believe that your grandmother's alive, just believe it. You can't, because that belief was formed in you naturally of the experience of all of her dying and seeing it and so forth. It wasn't like you just chose to believe your grandmother died. No, that belief is formed automatically in you with that experience. That, like, for example, like everything works that way, right? Like, so every experience.
Why did you make a distinction then? if everything works that way, then why the distinction between some are just formed naturally and some aren't? Like, what's the distinction?
Well, what I'm saying is, in terms of doxastic voluntarism, in terms of people choosing their beliefs, I don't think that that's possible. And I was just showing through certain reasons why I don't think that that's possible. So what I'm saying is just simply, for all of the above reasons, I think doxastic voluntarism is false, and I think that beliefs are naturally formed in people through exposure of some internal, external experience, and it can't be helped.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, so so you how would you define your agnosticism then that before you had that experience?
Well,
Without giving too much of yourself away, like, did you grow up in South Texas, or, you know, because a lot of that plays into it. What you
well,
might be agnostic, but you're still around a lot of religious people.
Well, I don't know if I was necessarily, like, I probably oscillated back and forth from agnosticism to irrational atheism, like unjustified irrational atheism, where basically, like, I would just parrot like just BS one-liners to try to invoke the falsehood of Christianity. Things like, you know, the men wrote the Bible, and you know, it's just been copied and copied and copied, and you know, and stuff. And I would say just, you know, all types of, you know, stuff like that, or I would just say that, you know, I would evoke like some type of, you know, there's no way that Jesus could have rose from the dead.
Why did you not accept any of those? Like, accept them as a part of your belief system?
Well, the first of all is because I was irrational and unjustified in a lot of the things that I believed. In that sense, like, where if you were to be like, you know, if you were to ask me back then, like, hey, you know, can you, you know, why are you an atheist? Like, you know, can you tell me what good reasons you have to believe this? I wouldn't have been able to articulate any good reasons. I wouldn't have been able to give you a great argument or anything. I wouldn't have even been able to link any. They would have been probably a bunch of fallacious reasoning and just anecdotal BS, right? I was just an unjustified, you know.
Did you grow up in a religious house?
No, but
no. You weren't around it much. You just, whatever, your friends or whatever went to church, but it never was anything that you were interested in.
Yeah, and after a certain form of measure, when I got a little bit older, I kind of used. I think a lot of atheists will use this as a blanket catch-all statement. I know you don't even have to say out loud that you've done this. I know that all people have thought something similar to this at one point in their life. At least most people. I thought something like this, and it's kind of in reference to the problem of evil. I just kind of thought, look, you know, I'm an alright guy. You know, I've done some things bad. I'm not a murderer or rapist or anything. You know, I'm a pretty good guy overall, you know. And I feel like, you know, I don't know if there's a God, you know. There might be, there might not be, but I don't know for sure. But, you know, if I die and I meet this holy God, whoever he is, and he's going to condemn me for whatever reason that it may be, you know, and I'm a pretty good guy, then, you know, fuck it, you know, it's not worth it to me anyways, you know, he's not worthy of worship anyways, if that's what this gig entails, you know. So I just figured, like, look, if God doesn't exist, I'm going about my life as a pretty good guy, and if God does exist, I'm going to go about my life as a pretty good guy, and if he's going to condemn me because of that, then oh fucking well, you know. And that I just oh well, he's not a good guy to begin with, and it's not worthy of even worrying about. And I just kind of felt like I kind of just left it at that. Mm-hmm. But after a certain point, for dually is irrational as a reason. So I'm not saying that when I stopped believing in atheism and I started coming to like agnosticism and deism, that I had rational justifications, because I really didn't. I came to deism and theism, or not theism, but deism and agnosticism for dually irrational reasons, right? Like I come to one day, and it was prodded by some discussion, and I'll tell you a little bit about it, anecdotal and really meaningless, but I just come to formulate one day, I was just like, and I used to watch a lot of Carl Sagan, Cosmos and whatnot, and Carl Sagan actually turned me into like a deist, I would say. I just came to a point one day where I was like, you know what? I don't believe that life can come from non-life. I don't believe it, and I won't believe it. And I took that position arbitrarily, and I never, not for any reasons, not for any justify. That's how I feel, and I can't help it. And then just one day, after enough exposure to enough stuff I seen of Carl Sagan and this and that, I just decided, no, it can't be. I'm not going to believe ever that life can come from non-life. I'm completely incredulous to that.
And what would happen if we could prove that?
Well, then I would have, like, if you could prove it in some, I'm not sure if this is even possible, but given that, like, in a thought experiment, say it was provable and, you could show it all down on paper and here it is, bang, bang, yeah, then I would be exposed to another experience that would elicit another belief, right? The fact that I was wrong. But up until, it would have to be something very, very, very cogent, and it would have to be something very definitive, such as that, just persuade me from my incredulity on that basis. And from there, I kind of just stayed a deist, and I really didn't care a whole lot about it. I kind of was of the impression, like, I didn't give Christianity really any thought. I just was just like, hey, look, there's something more to this. It just didn't come from nothing. Life, it came from life in some respect, and I just was more like a deist generally, and I didn't really care. And I don't know, I must have been like that for maybe a year or so before I finally came to Christianity.
So why Christianity? Why not Islam? Why not Hinduism?
Well, I actually looked into Islam. What brought me to Christianity was actually me looking into Islam. One of my interests, or it's not really an interest of mine anymore, because I picked up so many more passions once I became a Christian that I kind of just chucked that one away. But one of my interests for a while was Middle Eastern politics, Middle Eastern history, modern history and politics. I was, I'm really interested in that, and I started studying Islam as a way to better understand Middle Eastern culture and get an idea of, because that's heavily influencing over there. And I ended up studying the Quran and learning a little bit of Arabic and stuff. And I was studying a lot of Islamic theology and history. And I was interested in Islam, I would say that I was kind of passionately disinterested in being a Muslim. I flirted with the idea, but I never ever had made it to that point. But one night I just had this thought, and I was like, wow, I've been studying a lot on Islam, but really I don't really know a whole lot about the Bible. I don't know a whole lot about the Bible. I was like, it'd be really cool to kind of go back, since I know a little bit about Islam, and kind of contrast the Bible and look through the Bible, because I never really had ever given the Bible any serious look into, So that night I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna start slow, and tonight I'm gonna open the very first book of the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew, and I'm just gonna read it. I'm not gonna go look at any scholarly bull crap. I'm just gonna read the thing.
I was 5 years old when I started reading that book. Back in my day, when I was a Catholic, I grew up Catholic, and I was born in '62, which was the Vatican II Council year, and that they allowed the normal person, the normal Catholic, to actually own a Bible. So we got a family Bible. So I got to learn how to read from the Book of Matthew.
Wow, and so I just opened the Book of Matthew and I read it all in one sitting. It took 2 hours or something like that, and by the end of it, I wasn't self-identifying as a Christian, but the seed had already been planted, and there was no turning back from there. I felt just a deep conviction of truth, and that super hard to explain, in the fact that I jettisoned all my interest in Islamic theology, and all of what I thought about flirting with being a Muslim and stuff like that, I just jettisoned all that completely. It just was so totally irrelevant. I was just spoken to by the person in Christ and the gospel, and I was like, no, I just had this feeling that if God's going to speak to me, if God was going to say something, and it was going to be in written word, and He wanted to touch me, this is what He would write. And that I'm not saying this is what he would write for you or who, whatever, but this is what he would write to touch me.
Right.
And that was it. That's it. That's the end
So
of it.
You were not necessarily looking for something, but it kind of on some level confirmed or struck a note with you that you quickly grabbed onto it and instantly believed it.
Right.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I've heard stories like that before. People have read various books of the Bible or whatever, and they go, "Oh, this is real. This is alive." I've heard stories like this most of my life.
Can I ask why were you searching to begin with? You had said that you were pursuing perhaps the Quran and thinking about maybe exploring that as a belief mantle or whatever. But what was it that was compelling you in general? Were you questioning what's this all about and looking for answers, and that's what was inspiring the search, or was it something else?
No, it was my interest in Middle Eastern politics. So I had an interest in Middle Eastern politics, and I didn't care anything about religion, but I realized that religion plays a heavy role in Middle Eastern politics, so I kind of got sucked into studying Islam due to my passion of politics.
Fair enough, yeah. So you accidentally found religion.
Right, yeah.
So did your understanding as you started reading and learning and searching the texts and doing your the scholarship that you've clearly done on some of these issues, has that affected how you view Mideastern politics?
No, I don't. I jettison that as that's not even something I'm interested in anymore. I don't even stay relevant on that topic. It's because when I picked up Christianity and I become to be compelled about Christianity, there were so many other things that I started picking up that I was so interested in. Like, for example, I'm really interested in like textual criticism, like early New Testament history, like like Koine Greek, the synoptic problem, like source criticism within the Gospels and how they're based on each other, like a higher historical criticism on the dating of the Gospels. So like I'm just like I have so many things that I'm really super interested in that I haven't been able to fully devote the amount of time, because my time is limited. So I don't have time for Middle Eastern politics. I have so much right now that I can't. Basically, I have a bunch of stuff that I've got lined up that I need to study. That before I can look into anything else, I have to look into this stuff.
Makes sense, yeah. Sticking with this, it's really tough.
What could persuade you to give it up?
What could persuade me to not be a Christian? Well, it would have to be something very definitive, you know. It'd have to be, I guess if someone could make a positive argument, and like a positive and definitive argument for Jesus Christ not existing or something, like someone put forth the mythicist position and advance it in an undeniable way, that might do it for me. Besides something like that, it'd have to be something on that magnitude.
Because there are some pretty compelling stories about it. Some pretty compelling videos on that topic. Go ahead, Tonya.
Well, I would ask, is there anything even within science that we could discover that would change your mind? Like, for example, I just read about this the other day. Like, I guess there's a way now to create a baby from two different men or something like that. Like, is there anything that we could do, like in the future, scientifically, whatever, that would make you question God and think, oh, well, there's no way, just because of God's sovereignty alone, that he would allow such things to happen? Do you think that would shake your faith a little bit, maybe?
No, it probably wouldn't be anything along those lines. Maybe scientifically, if you could prove the truth of naturalism or something like that. But I mean, that would be but something definitive like that. But like it wouldn't be like, oh, look, we can create life, or look, we can seed life on other planets like the way that it happened to our planet. So perhaps that was what's happened to us, because that would only beg the question of how did those people come? Like, and if it just regresses infinitely to some people doing it, you know, it'd have to start somewhere. So what I'd feel like is, or even if we could make a baby from 2 males, I would just attribute that of just really excellent advances of science, you know, and I wouldn't say that any of that would contradict, like, oh, well, you know, look, you know, obviously they can extract DNA and they can make a child from not a male and a female, so obviously the Bible's false. Like, I don't think any of that would ever I don't think anything science would do short of proving the truth of naturalism would ever get me off the horse.
So you're basically, there are things that could change your mind. It just, they would have to be pretty specific.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a pretty high, you know, I got a pretty high criterion that I need met, you know. And you know, that's just me because of the powerfulness of my experience and what I feel, because it's not just the experience is what genuinely compelled me from the beginning to believe and start looking at this, but ever since I've been looking into a lot of this stuff, like historically and textually and stuff, like, my belief has just been, like, reinforced. So, like, I'm much stronger convicted in my faith than I was that night when I read the Gospel of Matthew. So it's going to take a lot to get me off of this. Like, I mean, it's going to literally take a lot. So, I mean, it's not that I'm just unreasonably giving you a high burden just because. It's because of all of the things that I've looked into that have pushed the burden this high, and you have to meet it based on that alone.
Mm-hmm.
You said earlier that you have you don't believe in naturalism. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing what you said. But if you don't believe in naturalism, what is it about naturalism that you don't believe? And what is the alternative view? And why? And I'm assuming that you believe that because of the experience and all the things you already outlined.
Well, when I say naturalism, I'm not speaking of it colloquially. I'm speaking of naturalism in terms of an antithesis to supernaturalism, right? So I'm just saying that when I say naturalism, I'm saying naturalism in the sense that what we have now could have arisen through only naturalistic means, right? So basically, the truth of atheism is what I mean. That
Well,
not only is atheism
naturalism
true,
isn't
but
necessarily
there's an accounting. There's an
position.
what? No. I understand that, but what I'm saying is that there would be a naturalistic accounting for how these things could come forth that wouldn't involve God, and they could prove that to be true.
Can you demonstrate the supernatural?
Can I demonstrate the supernatural? No, I don't claim to do.
So
be able
you
to do
believe
so.
in a natural world?
Yeah, I'm not. So I'm not. What I mean by naturalism is not that I deny that there's a natural world with natural laws and all this stuff. Obviously, I don't deny those things. I deny the fact that that the world has arisen strictly through naturalistic processes. I deny that. So
Well, how do you prove that?
How do I what?
How do you prove that?
What do you mean prove it? Well,
what's your evidence for that, other than the Bible?
Well, I mean, I could offer other evidences, like, for example, like, you know, tertiary arguments for supernaturalism, such as like the Kalam or something like that. I don't know if that's appropriate to do.
Those have been debunked so many times that I don't even.
I know, but
you
got to understand that the statement that you said is actually a fallacy.
Which one?
Stating that something has been debunked so many times in a flippant, dismissive, colloquial manner.
It's a known discussion, a known argument that has been torn apart and changed so many times. It's not even close to what it started out because it keeps getting shown to be wrong.
Well, if we are the judges of whether or not that's true or not, it hasn't. You know, it may be a necessarily argued thing, but it's not sufficient to everyone. I mean, there are people that think that the Kalam is part of a contribution of a whole set of evidences that collectively would lead one to believe that it's a valid piece of the puzzle. And you did ask the question, James. I think
I did. Yeah, I asked the question. Yeah.
Yeah, James saying, "Hey, that's part of my."
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, that's his belief package. I do get it. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Go ahead, atheist. I think he has a quick question for you, Seamus.
Yes. About the whole Judas thing, I'm just gonna put it simply. To me, you have an individual dying like 2 or 3 different deaths. I mean, how can you look at that and say, hey, that's not a contradiction? I mean, if just to give you an example, if I were to die tomorrow, and you were the cop investigating my death, and you had 2 or 3 witnesses coming forward with 2 or 3 different stories, wouldn't you consider that a contradiction in my death?
Can you say that last part again? I lagged for just a second there, atheist.
No, I said that if again the example I'm giving, if I were to die tomorrow and you were the cop investigating my death, and you had 2 or 3 witnesses coming up to you telling you 3 different stories, 2 or 3 different stories about what happened to me, wouldn't you consider that a contradiction?
Only if they're mutually exclusive of one another. So let me give you an example. So, okay, let's say that you died, right? And then let's say that you died of drowning, okay? And then one person reports that you choked to death. One person reports that you drowned. Another person just said that, hey, his face turned purple, and then he just collapsed. Okay. Now, those things would be a mutually inclusive set of drowning, right? None of those things specifically contradict each other. So in that case, I would say no. But if there was another case that said that, for example, Atheist Ranger died by having his head chopped off, okay, and then another account has you dying with your head wasn't chopped off. That would be a contradiction, right? Now there's something to understand here. Now, if you died by getting your head chopped off, and in reporting your death, someone fails to mention a few things, then we'd have to understand that someone's failure to mention something would merely just be an omission, and an omission of it in and of itself doesn't contradict something else. You'd have to have another statement to contradict another statement. So what I'm saying is, it depends on the given set of data, right? And what I'm saying in the case of Judas is, it's unclear. One passage speaks of Judas, clearly says, and this is how Judas died, and the other passage said that he cut and fell asunder, and his gut split up, and it's implied that that's how he died. So there's no direct contradiction in Jesus. He died this way and he died that way. It just says he died this way, and then another accounting, this is what happened. And those things can be harmonized amongst each other. So what I'm saying, in the specific instance of Judas, I think it can be harmonized. I think it's possible for him to die by hanging, and then for him to be cut down, and then either before he actually died from hanging, while he was still hanging himself, and then him fall down, on some rocky terrain and split asunder, or it could be B, that he had already died and got a little bloated. They call it cut him down, and then he split. Okay, and I think between the two of those, it could be rationally harmonized that that's not a contradiction.
Yeah, but you can't definitively say which one of what you're talking about actually happened. You can't definitively say which one of these deaths actually occurred.
Well, I'm saying that they both happened, but what I'm saying is it's ambiguous in the text as to which one actually killed him. It seems to point to that he died by hanging himself, right? But the other one just says that when he was cut down, his gut spilled out, and it doesn't say that that's how he died. It just implies people think when your gut spill out, you die, right? So.
Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much that does answer my question, but I still consider it a contradiction. But thank you for answering my question.
Hey, John, how you doing? Are you there? I know you're there.
Yeah, he's not muted. You're not muted if you are trying to talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, no, I'm doing well. Thank you. Yeah, taking a little break from the circus of a debate on TV. So, yeah, so I'll come to another debate.
So, well, we're not really debating anything. The topic of Joe and I are hosting the things that matter discussions, our discussion tonight, and we've been having a few of these, and this has been on air for a couple hours now. I started out talking with Tonya about beliefs and how we believe and what we believe, and can we change our beliefs, and do beliefs grow, change, morph, however you want to term it. So, you got any thoughts on that? We'd love to hear another perspective. We're kind of trying to get everybody to talk about it.
Yeah, especially, Brojo, I think you have come from one belief set to another. So if maybe you could start by just saying what you originally believed.
Yeah, sure. Briefly, I was raised Roman Catholic. Altar boy, did that whole thing. Left the church when I was a teenager. A few years later, became a born-again Christian, and for a number of years was involved in different churches, different denominations, ministry, teaching, coffee houses, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's you know, so I was in Christianity for a good 30 years.
And so you think do you think that the reason that you were in Christianity is because it was native to your developmental culture, that your family and so forth set the primer, and
that foundation there, and the teachings of Christ and the church, Catholic Church, were there here for sure. Mm-hmm.
How did that shape the way you saw people, places, and things?
As a Catholic, I can't really recall. I wouldn't say much, but when I started getting, when I was older and more in church by choice, so I'd say, I did see people. I kind of put people in two camps. It was either you were saved or you were unsaved, and I found that I tended to be judgmental. Also judging myself pretty partially, I would say, as well. At times, this wasn't the case all the time. I just say that because I have just a totally different outlook now. What started for I'm getting a little echo. I don't know. What started my quest in what many call deconversion now, and I know Tonya's gone through this pretty recently, a couple of years, and my journey started about, I think it was 2008, and you had YouTube coming on the scene. You had chats like Stickam, and where you're exposed to people of different beliefs, not only in religion, but different beliefs even about who and what Jesus was. Came across so many atheists. And my time in the church before the internet, you're pretty much your life is within the walls of the church. You're around people constantly and reinforcing those beliefs. I didn't come across non-believers or people who were skeptics and questioned stuff like that. Just didn't happen. So with the dawning of YouTube and the internet and all these different points of views, and I listen in on debates, I went into YouTube thinking I was going to evangelize the world for Jesus. This was my thing, And if somebody told me, well, in a couple of years you're going to be, a deist, I first wouldn't know what the hell that word was, and I would say you were crazy, because that's how strong my faith was. I went through very trying times that would probably shake most people's faith, but continued to endure it in the faith, and just thought that Yahweh would work it all out. So anyway, people would bring up these questions, very good questions, and it caused me to reinvestigate what I believed and why I believed it, rereading the Bible, history of the Bible, and stuff like that. And one of the first things that I started to look into was the doctrine of hell, which so that started a whole series of things in a 2-year process of studying and praying and trying to get answers. And so then go ahead.
Was there any, okay, so you started to question, as part of your existing social network was kind of tied to the beliefs too. Did that factor into your exploration at all?
Well, I guess I was it was a time because I did just move to a different state, so we left. I wasn't in the church I was initially in, so I actually had the liberty of not being confined in the walls of a church for so much. Although I um, I have a person here who was my ex-pastor in the area, and we talk and stuff like that, but it wasn't as strong. So I guess I did have that. Um, I don't know if you want to call freedom to more the question more. Um, so I didn't feel any pressure as far as having to hold down a job or something in the church, and or the social implications of leaving. Though they were felt afterwards. Once people that I did know over the years, some friends did fall away, um, and a couple stuck around despite I left the faith.
How'd your life change since you changed your belief?
Um, I have a saying. I had a saying, and then I later found out that it was already quoted by someone else in a little bit different way. You know how Jesus says the truth will set you free. Well, for me, it was the truth will set you free, but first it might just piss you off. And needless to say, I was a little bit angry. I had a little bit of resentment. I felt like I was kind of duped for so many years. But it was brief. Uh, I'm actually, I find my life more freeing. One, as I explained how I looked at people in the past, I now judge. I just judge. I don't judge people by what they believe, but what they do. Are your actions lining up with what your words? Are you practicing what you preach, no matter what you're preaching? So that's more how I judge people. And I don't have this dichotomy going on, you're saved and not saved. Again, it's just by what one's behaviors are. Also, to have the freedom to look into other beliefs and ideas, especially Eastern thought, kind of intrigued me. To even entertain those kind of things in the past, you were entertaining the doctrines of demons. So there was a lot of fear in that in the past, which I don't feel at all. It's actually, I feel I get a little bit bigger picture and concept of what this creator might be.
Is there anything about your old belief system that you miss that you wish you could carry forward?
The biggest thing I do miss, and I guess that's why I try to fill in that void a lot here on G+, is the social aspect. The coming together and friendships. A lot of my church life was in my 20s, and so there was always a group of us. Some most of us were single at the time, but the whole the community aspect of it, I would miss. I didn't do miss.
Yeah. If there was anything you could get your former folks that you associated with to believe or to understand that you now think is valuable because of the way that you believe now, what would that be, and why is it important?
I would say this, that one, be true to yourself, that your belief in an afterlife is totally faith. Be truthful about that. There is no fact about an afterlife or this heaven. We have no proof of this, and that what really all you have that is guaranteed is every time that you wake up in the morning, you have that day, and to treat every day as a precious gift. And as far as, like, say, doctrines or something like that, again, the doctrine of hell, I find it's unjust, unreasonable, and at this point, just ridiculous. It was just a fear tactic, I think, used by the church in general to control and manipulate.
Yeah, if I'm hearing something telegraphed through your story, you had said that idea of being eternally punished or exploring anything else would be disapproval from the Almighty, and all of that kind of put you in a prison, if I'm characterizing it right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you consider yourself better off now, I suppose.
Oh, way better. Oh, most definitely.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Oh, no problem. Anytime.
Anybody else have any questions for Rojo?
I have a question, John, because I've just been pondering how long I've known you and everything like that. Did Sister Sunshine deconvert after you did?
I believe so. Yeah, she did. Yeah.
After.
I remember having many conversations with her while I believe she was in Oneness Pentecostal movement.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I was going to ask you. I couldn't remember which had happened first, and I was going to ask you if her deconversion would have messed with you at all. Because yours messed with me, and so did hers. Like, I'd never seen anything like that shit. Like, somebody actually, like, saying, nope, Jesus ain't real. I'm like, what? Especially after, like, the conversations I'd had with you guys, you know what I mean? Like, we were, like, Christians.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
man.
I lost a couple of Christian friends here on YouTube, yeah, who I used to, fellowship with and stuff, But I mean, it's expected, Yeah, usually, like they say, birds of a feather flock together. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's gonna happen, Even like my pastor friend here once he found out, we talked all the time, and he would call me almost every day, and we talk about the Bible and Jesus and stuff like that, and yeah, once the deconversion, though, the friendship's kind of there, but the calls, yeah, they're very far and few between because we don't have that commonality, which is, an anchor to his life. We don't have that commonality to share anymore. I found it quite interesting also that people, maybe because it's just they don't know how to deal with someone who leaves the faith. But I found it interesting that many would not even, people who I thought friends, would not even approach me and ask me why, what happened, out of any kind of concern or something, If my eternal soul was at stake here, you would think, you really would want to know why,
Something Tonya had said earlier, John, was that, and I've experienced this too, is as believers, we were told that people who are in an apostate position or in a backslidden position or non-believing status anymore are to be shunned or to be ignored, are to be put away until turned over to the reprobate mind, however you want to term it.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're told to do. So yeah, when I left, I lost all my friends. I lost my entire social network. And it's taken years to get even a little one back because people just, they don't want to deal with me anymore because I don't believe the same shit they do. So, but yeah, it's tough. It really, really is.
And no doubt, I mean, I'm here, I share something personal, for those who know, my wife is a devout Christian. We met at a Christian retreat. We've had some, experiences to this day which I cannot, explain. That's why I do hold to some kind of spiritual belief or God belief concept. I don't have no dogma about it or try to tell you that this is the way. It's just my path. So it's some of those experiences that I cannot deny. I mean, we can go into all the psychosis of it and stuff like that. But I mean, it was to much less a degree now. It was a strain on our relationship because our foundation was there in Christianity. And a short time after we get married, we move out, and then, oh my God, a lot of times I felt so bad. I felt bad because I felt like, I totally understand if she wanted to leave because this is not what you signed up for,
Well, and there are those scriptures that say, "Thou shalt not be unequally yoked with the unbeliever." You know, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
biblical.
Well, we were
commitment.
married as Christians. You know, we were married as Christians afterwards. You know,
Irrelevant.
so
I mean, I know people who have left their spouses after one of them have deconverted because the Bible is very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually went through like the opposite process. My husband was an atheist and I was a Christian, right? But I didn't really give a shit about Christianity until my sister deconverted and I started really looking into stuff. So we had already been married. And when I got really into Christianity and like kind of brainwashed myself into becoming a fundamentalist, that's what happened. I almost left him. Like I did, because there was one night and I prayed and I was like, God, tell me what to do, because he thinks I'm crazy. The thought of living with a man who thought I was insane bothered me. Okay. So I prayed about it and I was like, you tell me what to do, Lord. And then I opened the book. It was one of those. Like, I'm going to open it up to what you want me to read, Lord. It was one of those. And I opened up to that part in Corinthians about actually no, it wasn't the unequally yoked part. It was the one where it was like, if a woman is married to an unbeliever, you are supposed to stay in the marriage, and that you might convince him or save him.
And that he's covered under your grace and all that stuff.
So I was like, okay, that's good enough for me, and I closed it up. So that was like, that was a thing for a minute. But yeah, it can definitely strain your relationships big time.
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah, most of my ex-girlfriends, in fact, my ex-fiance was Christian. And my ex-fiance's mother did not like the fact that she was engaged to an atheist.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I can understand
You're like
that.
the devil.
And you know, it was good with the internet too, even because after you're going through this deconversion process, to find support for people who are going through the same thing. I mean, internet helped with that. Sites like xchristian.net were very helpful to me because, you know, we were sharing a similar story, you know.
Yeah, it is a community, good or bad. It is where a lot of us get our just people that relate. It's, you know, that's why Joe and I are trying to have these discussions that take us from somewhere and point us somewhere else, because we have to figure out what we can do with how we are and get there together, because ultimately we are together, and we have to figure out how to get there. So not that we're going anywhere, but we just got to go together.
I just thought of something when you had said that. It's kind of like the sense of community that we're talking about. That's just in our nature, and religion has hijacked it, you know, because they really have. So I don't know, just a thought.
Well, that's true. They've taken our propensity to want to be together and given us an identity, and that identity has become what's controlling the society and the social fabric.
And they've given us an afterlife in which we are going to be a community forever with the people we love. I mean, how the hell does it get any better than that?
Well, I mean, really, can it?
With a set of rules that they suggest, if we follow to the letter, which we couldn't come up with on our own. We couldn't possibly have innately in ourselves either. They've hijacked it and taken ownership of all of those things. Yes.
Right. So, do you want to give us a little bit about yourself? Like, have you ever had any one of those transforming beliefs? Like, where do you come from?
Yeah. I would say that I was inoculated against religion very early on, learning Dr. Seuss. I read the Lorax, and when the Lorax didn't come back, I was distressed, and I was distressed and depressed for a good year until I finally grew up and realized this was a story. At which point, when people presented to me stories, I was like, that's a nice story. What is the lesson to be learned from it? I can learn the lessons from it. So I've embraced Christian philosophy as I've grown, But I've also explored further to find the commonalities in other religions. I've explored Buddhism, not so much Islam, but a little bit of Islam, more of the Sufi and Jain traditions, a little bit of the Baha'i, and then around the world at some point, and I became nihilistic and depressed again, and found my way into alcoholism, which runs in my family, and probably I have a genetic predisposition for anyway, but I got to the point of drinking myself to blackout on a regular basis and inducing seizure disorder. So I had to quit at one point, and I was referred to AA, and that's probably the closest I came to a spiritual conversion. I had declared myself a militant agnostic for years. There's no way that you can know one way or the other, but through the carefully orchestrated program of AA, as I was just getting sober and very emotionally vulnerable, I was led to a place where I could have been a very strong deist. I still have tendencies in that direction. I want to believe. That's the X-Files slogan, right? Well, when it comes to religion, I really want to believe, but I haven't found anything yet that appeared supernatural that I couldn't find a better natural explanation for. For example, the crucifixion and the resurrection seems all mysterious, but I think about the idea that maybe Jesus was trained by some Buddhists or some other deep meditators. After all, he did appear to be a very learned rabbi, at least in the stories that are told of this character, whether he existed or not. And I hear about all that debate, and I'm not terribly concerned because the influence of the character on history is what's relevant to me, I guess, and influence on people today. Yeah, I came up with this idea that, okay, he could have deep meditated into a trance state where his was heart fluttering, so it seemed like his heart had stopped, and it appeared like he must have bled out, but if he had some kind of deep trance meditation, he could have been taken down long before he died, appeared dead. What are the things that were taken to the burial crypt? Myrrh, frankincense, and myrrh, but myrrh was a healing herb, so curious. A little bit of interaction with some knowledge of Chinese fireworks, distract some Roman guards away from the tomb in the crypt, and they'll run away saying it was an angel. Sure, fine. I could rationalize an explanation of all of that story. So I just couldn't quite grab hold of that. On the other hand, I could respect the image of someone who might have been very advanced, way ahead of his time, presenting ideas that were heretical and still are heretical because of the way we're still evolving socially. But somewhere along the lines in AA, they were saying you have to, the only way this is going to work is if you have a higher power, a loving higher power, and you can define it however you want. So I tried, and I kept going with the grace thing. There, but for the grace of God go I. Here I am sober. But somewhere about 2 years sober, somebody mentioned this idea, yeah, well, if it's the grace of God that's keeping you in the room, then it's the wrath of God that's keeping all of those other people outside of the room. So it's not a very loving God, is it? And I suddenly shattered apart on all of that starting system that might have become a strong deism, and I kind of found non-dualism and said, okay, yeah, it's all one, and kind of floated around with that idea, wanting that to have some kind of mystical answer, and found that came up short. So So I came back to the idea, what is the God thing? And so I kept with that for a while, and then I started to say, okay, I'm atheist, but I'm really kind of apatheist. I don't care what you believe as long as you're good people. But I also found myself being sort of socially outcast in AA because I wasn't just subscribing to this God. I was saying my higher power was reality, and that just wasn't acceptable. That wasn't mystical enough. That wasn't going to do the trick. That wasn't what AA was about. Yeah. So I related to that part that Brojo was just saying about what we all were saying about that isolation from the social group, and I have seen this happen before for other reasons. I experienced it in NA as well, yeah. But I've seen people who, because they didn't get that part, get shunned from the social support that really was the most helpful thing in solidifying my sobriety, I think. And I see them get run out of the room, so I became very disillusioned with that whole program and institution. But I still kept looking for things. I went looking in A Course for Miracles. I went looking in Urantia. I keep looking. And the truth is that I personally represent as an agnostic now. I just don't quite think I understand it enough to see anything that's supernatural. I think it's all wonderful, and I think that the idea of a capital G, good, God, Gut, German derivative word, is a beautiful thing, and I think it's one of the wonderful things of human nature that we can fathom it, explore it, and strive for it. I just don't see it as an external agency. I just don't see that. So I love the human spirit behind it. I love the ambition of improving ourselves in an image that we understand is greater than anything we have ever been. And I hope that people keep doing that. But when people suggest something to me like, without God, there would be no moral system, it really scares me because it makes me think that maybe they don't have what seems to be natural to me. Maybe they need that in order to not be uncivilized. And I have deep challenges with anti-theism, except where it addresses the secular business of government, or if it's impinging upon other people. I really come back to the atheist thing. If you want to believe in a rock, that's great. Just don't throw it at me or anybody else. We're all good. Whatever gets you through and helps you to be a better person, that's what I'm looking for too. I kind of live by, I'd like to learn something new and help somebody every day. If I've done that, I've done great. So that's where I'm at.
I like the way you think.
Put your headphones back on, Joe. Oh, sure, he's probably.
Some people say that I'm kind of universalist deist, and I can't argue against it because there's a very strong part of me that well, wants to win the lottery too. I equate those two things in me. Those are desires, but to say that I actually hold those beliefs would there wouldn't be any desire. It'd just be, to me, it would. If I had faith in those beliefs, I should say, it would be equivalent to knowledge in me. If I had real faith, as far as I understand the word faith, there wouldn't be doubt. It's the absence of doubt. That's what faith is, the absence of doubt. And when I hear supernatural explanations, I have all kinds of doubts because it doesn't seem to explain anything that contradicts how can we keep doing this good thing and avoid the bad thing. Because that's real important, is how can we use what happened to learn and do the next right indicated thing.
Yeah, like I said before, I was so rudely interrupted by my own echo. That I like the way you think. I think that picking up the philosophical points that you can apply to your life that are practical and rewarding and all of that is probably the best we could do amidst the fact that we have a difficult time nailing down anything with absolute certainty except the fact that something exists. So.
Well, maybe something exists.
Yeah, and people talk about cherry picking from the Bible, and I agree that's a horrible practice, because what we really should be doing is using one of the analogies that's actually used in the Bible, and that's separating the wheat from the chaff. And if we sift through the Bible using its own principle of separating wheat from the chaff, there's some huge, wonderful, deep philosophical, social insight lessons to be learned there. And to reject it part and parcel, to me, seems to be as flawed as to accept it part and parcel. So, thanks.
Yeah. Well, with that, we should probably take the live portion off air so that I don't have to download a 8 meg file or an 8 gig file, rather.
Well, we've only been at it for 2 3/4 hours.
Yeah, that's hardly a few minutes.
That's right.
So, but
It's hardly even noticed.
I want to thank Tonya Galaxy especially, but everybody else too, for sharing their stories and helping us to give some traction to this difficult question of why do we believe the things we do, and the even more important one of how does it shape our life. So unless anybody has anything else they want to add, anybody?
Well, I think it's been a fantastic discussion, lots of different points of view, and I think there's a lot to be said on this topic that we probably haven't touched on, but I think we've covered a lot of why we believe stuff and a little bit on how we believe it and why and how we can change it. So I think it was a good night.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for listening, watching, and participating. And we're going to be doing more of these type of conversations in the future, just seeing what we can do to better navigate. So, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Aloha.
Thank you.